Good morning, members. Good morning, members of the public. You're all very welcome this morning. We've got a full agenda here today, so I'll make a start. First of all, I'll ask the officer to read out the health and safety regulations.
Yes, good morning. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room down the corridor. Cold water is also available in the breakout area. If the fire alarm should sound, we don't expect a fire drill today, please leave the meeting following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch and remain there until you are told it is safe to return. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent.
I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and press may film, record, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Babergh District Council are voice recording this meeting. Any member of the public who attends the meeting and objects to being filmed should have advised the committee clerk. And there's nobody wish to make any representations? No? As far as I'm aware, no one has indicated that they will be filming or that they do not want to be filmed. In accordance with the council's plan and charter, members of the public are not permitted to communicate, whether verbally or in writing, with members of the committee during the course of the meeting, including any adjournments. If a member of the committee is approached by a member of the public, then they must immediately draw it to my attention and also to the attention of the legal advisor present. If a member of the public attempts to communicate with a member of the committee, then they may be asked to leave the meeting. Finally, can members, officers, and any public speakers ensure that you press the microphone for speaking and turn off when you have finished, and please keep as close to it as possible and try not to hold your papers over like that, because that will make it distorted. Thank you. Right, substitutes and apologies.
Yes, we have received apologies from Councillor Zach Norman and Councillor Sue Ayres. Councillor Margaret Maybury is substituting for Councillor Ayres.
Thank you. And we do not have a sub for Councillor Norman, because I've got down Mary McLean. She hasn't turned up or haven't contacted you?
We haven't been contacted.
Thank you. So, Kent Maybury.
We have also received an apology for Councillor Hinton.
It was rather late, but we've received an apology from Councillor Hinton. Councillor Maybury.
Thank you, Chairman. I am Councillor Margaret Maybury, and I am substituting for Councillor Sue Ayres, who is currently on vacation.
Thank you very much. And because there is an application in your ward later, you're remaining a member of the committee throughout the whole morning. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I declare that I am the ward member for Lavenham, but I intend to stay on the planning committee and not speak as the ward member. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, where you just had
Chair, before we leave that, no, we've got Derek Davis here. Is he not substituting for John Hinton?
No, I'm sorry, Councillor Hinton. I don't think it informed the officers, and by the time they got to hear of it, it was past the deadline, which is 1 o'clock yesterday lunchtime. And members, it is important that we do have to get the names in, as we found out at the last meeting, by 1 o'clock.
But can I ask if Derek Davis has taken the trouble to read all of the papers and turn up, and we are limited in numbers, wouldn't it be beneficial to have one on the committee?
It might be beneficial, I might even support it, but I don't think we can bend the rules at all, Councillor Busby.
Further, if Councillor Busby or you particularly want me to, but I agree, basically.
Yeah, I'd like to know why he can't do it.
Well, I mean, we have a rule in the Constitution and the planning, or the planning charter, and I think if we didn't follow it without a very exceptionally good reason, or even if we did have something looking like an exceptionally good reason, there would be an argument that we had breached our own internal rules, and that would cast some doubt over the legality of decisions made.
Councillor Busby, you was here at the last meeting? Yes, you're down. Yeah. We had Councillor Mick Fraser present, who had actually contacted them in the about 17 minutes past 3, I think it was, which was too late. But he also had a planning application coming up, so he actually was in the room and sat here, but he was still not allowed to take part, only on that planning application. So we've got one rule already set, and it has to apply to all of them. Thank you. We'll move on. Declarations of interest. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say I have a non-pecuniary interest, and I'd just like to go to our solicitor for advice. But it's on item DC 19/03614. As Stu, my wife actually is a cabinet member for housing.
That matters, but I'll check with the legal.
No, well, Councillor Osborne spoke to me, and we agonised a bit about whether to even mention it, because the law nowadays acknowledges husbands and wives and partners are independent of each other. But I think an average member of the public might think, well, if Councillor Osborne happens to be married to the cabinet member who's has some involvement as politically as for the service area, it is something that should, for the sake of comfort, be declared. So that's been done.
Thank you very much. If you're happy, then we have to be happy also. Item 3, to confirm the minutes held on the 6th of November. They've all been circulated and you've seen them. Can I accept them as a true record? Councillor Osborne, seconded by Councillor Barrett. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. I'll sign them now. Item 4, to receive a notification of any petitions.
None received, Chair.
Site inspections. Do we have any site inspections? No. Thank you. Members, do you have any site inspections you wish to request? No? Good. That means then that site inspection day next Wednesday the 27th. You have the day off again. You can all go Christmas shopping and perhaps take out your other halves and they can enjoy it. Oh, thank you very much. I'll hold you to that, Councillor Busby. After our little chat this morning, I have come to the conclusion that you do have a heart. Right, we'll move on to item number 6. Plan and applications for determination by the committee. Right, you've got them in front of you. The first one is 6A on page 9. And the case officer is Stephen Stroud. Over to you, Stephen.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Just as a bit of housekeeping, in the late papers, members will have seen that we have received a further response from the Council's ecologist, just confirming that they're satisfied in relation to likely impacts upon protected species. However, their objection remains in relation to priority species, i.e. farmland birds. So for that reason, the relevant reason for refusal at the end of the paper still stands, because whilst we're satisfied in respect of protected species, we're still not satisfied in respect of priority species, I hope that makes sense. Right, so in respect of the item before you, this is an outline planning application, some matters being reserved, with us considering the site access. It's for the erection of up to 150 dwellings, use of land for community facilities, public open space, landscaping, SUDS, a vehicular access point from Brantham Hill, and that's following demolition of an existing bungalow and outbuildings. The location is land west of Brantham Hill. The applicant is Gladman Developments. The site area is 9.36 hectares. So this is site location plan. Just for context, members, we've got obviously the village of Brantham to the east here adjacent, Brantham Hill being the main road through, leading down towards Manningtree, and then Ipswich to the north. Manningtree railway station is about 2.5 kilometres away, and East End just to the north here, and obviously East Burgolt to the northwest. This is a constraints map. Just to pick up here, members, you've got a number of public rights of way that move around the site and indeed abutting its western boundary here. And the built-up area boundary follows the Brantham Hill road and cuts through the front of the site. So effectively, as you'll note from the papers, for all intent and purposes, the residential aspects of the development will all be outside of, albeit abutting the settlement boundary, Brantham being a hinterland village in the core strategy. Further constraints map, just identifying here that the western boundary of the site abuts the Dedham Vale area of outstanding natural beauty. Members will also note from the papers, I think on page 11, that there is a further diagram provided which shows the site in context adjacent to the Dedham Vale area of outstanding natural beauty, and then also to the east and the north you'll see the proposed extension areas to the Suffolk coast and heaths AONB, which in all likelihood is likely to be approved and extended. There is an order which is currently with the Secretary of State, but for the purposes of this application we've considered the AONBs as they currently stand, but in any event the Suffolk coast and heaths AONB is within proximity to the site from its eastern boundary. This is an aerial map which just shows a little bit more context. Members will recall that earlier this year we approved reserved matters for the Taylor Wimpey scheme as part of the Brantham regeneration site and allocation just to the south here. The other thing I think I'd point out to members is there is really, in officers' opinion, a really quite strong and defined sense of place characterised by this spine road, Brantham Hill, which runs down here, which effectively sets the border between the village and the landscape to the west, and then sort of in the belly of the village, so to speak, to the east, you've then got all of the built aspects there. And then a further red line plan, which just shows how the site has been drawn. This southern boundary is sort of arbitrary in its drawing. There are no particular landscape features that run along here, other than this wooded area copse just here, which the red line follows around. And the access to the site, obviously off Brantham Hill, is just here, following past an existing bungalow that I'll show you in photos in a moment, and then outbuildings here that are all set for demolition. This is an access plan. Same access, I think the one on the right is just slightly enlarged, obviously just showing how the site would meet Brantham Hill, and I'll run through that when we get to the photos in a second. And then this is development framework plan. So As I said at the start, this is an outline planning application, so effectively we're considering the principle of the development and also its access. The framework plan is showing how the development could be brought forward, where you have here the residential aspects, the built aspects of the scheme here, and then there's proposed to be landscaping, sort of enclosing the site, enclosing the residential development with SUDS features and obviously open space as well as a woodland type buffer. At the front of the site you've also got an area of land which has been allocated for community purposes as set out in the papers. Just moving on then, members, to some pictures, and then this is another a viewing context. This is a LiDAR representation which shows that you do have a site which is sort of gently undulating, and then there are a change in levels sort of moving gradually down towards the river there. Obviously the application site being roughly in this location, public right-of-way running across here roughly, and then also along here as I'm tracing with the mouse. On some photos, so this is from the proposed site access looking south onto Brantham Hill, and then north, and then of the access itself. This is the bungalow that would be set for demolition to give way to obviously make improvements for the access itself and where the community land is proposed to be. And just a further photo, you can also pick up some of those dilapidated buildings there that would be set for demolition if members were minded to approve this application contrary to recommendation. And photos, this is from one of the footpaths off of Slough Road to the north of the site, just looking down and across. I mean, unfortunately, these pictures, it doesn't quite do it justice. This is a particularly fantastic landscape, and bearing in mind all of the public rights of way that do move around the site, it clearly offers great recreational benefits to members of the public. This is from one of those public rights of way which runs parallel to the northern boundary of the site, just looking south. And this is a slightly enlarged view. So effectively the development would be set right in the foreground of this picture. One thing you can't quite pick up from here, and also in another photo in a moment, that is as you move down in a southerly direction along the public rights of way, you can pick up the sort of the gentle undulations in the landscape as it leads you down to really quite a fantastic view of the river, which of course is going to substantially change should development go ahead. This is from sort of the northwestern corner of the site. You can sort of just pick up gently some of that kind of focal view there that I've just mentioned down towards the river. You've also got Brantham Hill just here to the left of the picture. This is from the same perspective now, but looking at Brantham Hill and the proposed area for the site access leading then into the site. And that's the end of the photos. So effectively, members, just to take you to the end of the paper, I'll just remind you of the planning balance and conclusion. Obviously, decision taking begins with the development plan. It's of vital importance that planning decisions are plan-led. The MPPF, which is of course an important material consideration, reiterates that point. The circumstances of this application are not exceptional. Among other issues identified, the development represents a discordant projection into open countryside in the immediate setting of the Dedham Vale AONB, undermining the way that it is experienced, at odds with a very clear and defined spatial grain and within a sensitive landscape context, which officers consider to be a valued landscape with regard to MPPF parlance. It would be an unwelcome growth latched to the spine of Brantham. The applicant has further failed to prove a justifiable need for the development having regard to local circumstances. The application chiefly conflicts with the wide range of policies. It offends the development plan when taken as a whole. The application is also deficient in a number of other ways, with insufficient information being provided in respect of highways, archaeology, drainage and ecology. The Council, as set out in the papers, cannot be satisfied that the development would be acceptable in relation to those matters in the absence of appropriate detail. The Council can demonstrate that it has a 5-year housing land supply, and taken in the round, the most important policies for the determination of this application do remain up to date. The application cannot therefore benefit from the tilted balance as set out in the core strategy and the MPPF. Assessed against the NPPF, the application performs no better. It'd be contrary to the development plan and to national planning policy, and there are no material considerations that justify a departure from those policies. The harm identified significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. On that basis, members, you are invited to refuse planning permission for the various reasons that are set out on page 37 and 8 of your papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that full and comprehensive report. It's a site we all know of, and reading through lots of the things we've seen before. With no public speakers here, parish council objector, supporter, applicant or agent, or county councillor, but we do have the local ward member, Councillor McCraw. If you have up to 5 minutes which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to members. I'll try and keep this brief, not least because I have a horrible cold. I'm sure that might be something of a relief to you. Not the cold bit, obviously.
Can you get nearer to the mic?
Sorry, I apologise. It's the cold. Okay. This application falls into a category of some of the more speculative outline ones that we've seen during the period where we were unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. Now, that condition no longer exists, and we're able to give the proper weight to our own policies. I'm just going to trundle through the main points of the report, and I know that all members know this stuff, but we sometimes forget that the public as a whole find planning in general not necessarily easy to understand. Heaven knows we've all worked hard enough to try and ourselves to grasp it. But since we now webcast and we're aiming for transparency, I thought it worth summarising for all those interested or concerned who may view this now or later. And that's part of what we do, summarise. You have a clear background in Part 2, paras 2 to 13. The consultation in Part 3, paras 14 to 33, shows consistent objections from the most significant consultees. Both the parish councils, principally Brantham, highways, flood, archaeology, planning policy, landscape, AONB, and there are holding objections elsewhere. These largely are on the grounds of access, transport, lack of information, the emerging local plan, and safety. The report is very strongly expressed in Part 4, the policy framework, paras 34 to 126, providing supporting examples of which engaged policies are failed and why. The principle of development under CS2 and CS11 is failed. There are no exceptional circumstances. Paras 65 and 66 show almost complete failure of the criteria. Landscape effects in paras 68 to 88 refer not only to CS11, CS14, CS15, but multiple paragraphs of the NPPF. This is undeveloped land that should remain so for many demonstrated reasons. Land that makes Suffolk what it is and should remain, a rural landscape with pockets of development only. We have room for both. The section continues to examine highway impacts, and I'm pleased to see reference to cumulative impact that we have perhaps not given full consideration to in the past. The rate of growth of cars now exceeds that of population, and there are considerable local safety aspects on Brantham Hill. This sort of proposed access point should always be subject to close scrutiny. Of archaeology, flood risk, ecology and agricultural land, I have little to add. There are, of course, benefits attached, paras 120 to 126, but those are no more than required by policy. And with so much else non-compliant with policy, there can only be one decision. Part 5, the planning balance and conclusion, paras 127 to 132, list these and invite a refusal of planning permission. In passing, I'd like to add that the style and structure of this report has been very useful, not only to me and perhaps to you, but I think to the public at large. And it's not just because I agree with the thrust of the report. It might appear straightforward to us, but we know it takes a lot of time to distill these matters down to a clear spirit. Something very close to my heart. It's not often that members of this planning committee will be presented with such a unanimous view from community, from statutory and non-statutory consultees, from our own qualified officers, and from our own and national policies. I ask members to continue that unanimity by a decision to resolve the recommendation to refuse for all the reasons given at the end of the report. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions to the ward member? No? Okay. Thank you very much. There's no questions. Right, members, it's over to you. Who'd like to start the debate? Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In all the years that I've sat on planning, in all the years I've sat on planning, I've never seen as many objections as has been put into this case, and I think Stephen Stroud has done a really good job on this one, and obviously the ward member here emphasising the fact of those policies and the MPPF, and I can't have any reason not to propose a refusal for the officer's recommendation. The only one I would say is that with a large amount of housing like this, unfortunately, probably, it might fall on other areas to take up this amount of housing.
Thank you. Members, you have seen the table papers. I'll just remind you of that. They're in front of you. And there is a paragraph relating to this item. Thank you for that proposal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Plum, do you wish to comment?
Only to say that let's get this matter over and settled. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Barrett?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add to Adrian's comments about highways, because I've not actually seen highways object to a proposal before, so I think that's quite significant. And I think we all understand the issues affecting the roads in that area. So I would like to add my thoughts to refusal of this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parker?
It is now. Just like to add to all of the comments that are being suggested here this morning, or said here this morning. I like to see a debate around these as a rule, but frankly the reasons are so compelling and so comprehensive that it kind of stops us from having that debate in many respects. So just on a technical point, I'm always interested to know, because we do hear in other cases that for whatever reason CS2 and the need for exceptional circumstance might be mitigated by a policy elsewhere. That is clearly not the case here. I just wouldn't mind some clarification around why that is particularly.
Can you help, Stephen? I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I think the weighting to be afforded to policy is a matter of judgment, and it can vary on the circumstances that you've got before you. I think what you have here is a blatant conflict with the development plan as a whole. It's not just CS2, but it's a range of other policies. And because of the breadth of issues that you've got, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to identify why there would be exceptional circumstances here, or indeed why, if there were compliance with the other policies in the development plan, why perhaps a conflict with CS2 would be less significant as a result when you're balancing up and weighing the various considerations, and indeed the benefits of the scheme, which of course are quite significant because this is a scheme for 150 houses. It does bring with it a lot of social and economic benefits, but actually the harm here is so acute that actually by any measure this scheme is simply not supportable. As I say in the concluding remarks, it does no better when scored against the MPPF, so you've effectively got nothing to play against the policy harm that you've got in respect of the development plan. So, as I say, however you cut it, I think this is a refusal. Obviously, the applicant has a right of appeal. They clearly have a number of reasons for refusal that they would need to work through. I think at its heart this is a landscape case, and I don't think they're going to get away from the fact that there is really quite significant landscape harm, particularly bearing in mind that this is considered to be a valued landscape within the setting, especially of that Dedham Vale AONB. And it's not that there is a clearly defined break between this site and the AONB. I mean, they effectively merge into one. I mean, it's clearly a very sensitive landscape, and of itself, just planting a lot of trees around the site, I don't think is going to ameliorate the very significant visual impacts that there would be. I mean, the landscape will be transformed as a result. So I think however you cut it, there's really quite severe harm here. Other applications that you might have coming before you in weeks or months to follow, that may be very, a much finer balance that needs to be struck, where the kind of the degree of conflict with those policies may not be so great or significant, but it's an across the board no here, I think.
Thank you. You wish to come back?
Not so much come back, but thank you, Stephen, for that very fulsome explanation. Just as a point to note, Mr. Chairman, I think it's very disappointing that an applicant that seeks to put 150 houses on our district, against policy, isn't here to represent or explain themselves. I think that's a very poor state of affairs. Just say that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. It's noted, Councillor Parker. Can I just be reassured by the Chief Planning Officer that our 5-year land supply is robust at this present time? Thank you.
The short answer is yes.
Over to you then, Stephen.
I don't actually have much more to add. I mean, the recent housing land supply position statement that was published in September, it's up to date in respect to the fact that it follows national planning policy and guidance. So we're satisfied that it's robust in that respect, and it reflects the most up-to-date position of the council. Obviously, that's not the only route in to identify whether the quote-unquote tilted balance is engaged. That also relates to the datedness of policies and whether taken in the round they're up to date. As I set out in the papers, there may be a degree of inconsistency between policy CS2 and the MPPF, but the rest of the policies taken in the round, that basket of policies that are applicable in these circumstances, are absolutely up to date. So this is to be determined and dismissed in accordance with the development plan. There are no other material considerations that indicate otherwise.
Thank you. Members, have you any other questions? Councillor Busby?
Sorry, can we go back to the slides? Can you put up slide 5, I think, please?
Sorry, I'm not great at this.
I think that one just shows how out of place it would be to put houses in there. You've got a very strict linear development along the road there. If you move on to 9, sorry to jump about, you actually referred to this as gently falling to the river. I think you missed the clue that it's on Brantham Hill. If you've ever tried to cycle up that hill, it is not gently in any shape or form. And if you go onto the photographs, can I just say that they're probably the worst photographs of fields I've ever seen in my life. They don't do absolutely anything for the presentation whatsoever. Bring back Vincent. Where is he? When we need him.
You can tell that he didn't assist me with this particular PowerPoint.
Certainly can. The point, I think the key point here is that there's no proven need from the applicant in any shape or form. There's no housing survey or whatever. Actually, in your paragraphs in your report, on paragraph 59, you talk about the 144 in Brantham, in Bergholt, the 288 in Brantham already. We don't actually mention there's hundreds the other side of the river in Lawford, I think, that will impact upon the highways infrastructure, particularly the underpass at the bridge. I think that needs to be taken into account as well. So there is nothing going for this application.
Thank you very much. Despite the fact that you didn't have a bike with you to go up and down this hill for Councillor Busby, he fully agrees with you. Any other comments, members? No, I'm sorry. Any other views? No? Councillor Barrett?
May I just sort of ask for advice on how much weight we should give to the need or the we talked about that. So the houses that are approved currently at Brooklands. Is that 300 or just below? 280. Yeah. Is that demonstrating that need has been met? Is that what this hinges on?
Well, as ever, that's a matter of judgment. I think the point for the policy is that it is incumbent upon the applicant to demonstrate how their particular proposal meets a need. And I think as a matter of common sense, I think you can see that there's a lot gone on in that village and its functional cluster. And it would be for the applicant to show why there is a residual need, certainly for that quantum of development that's proposed. And they simply haven't done that, so that is another, in officer opinion, conflict with the policy itself, and indeed the MPPF, which requires applications to respect local circumstances. If the applicant is not in a position to be able to tell us what those circumstances are and why this application would fit, well, then it fails to meet the terms of that policy. No doubt, well, I'm guessing here, but I should imagine the applicant will now go away and do a bit of work as a prelude to an appeal, but we'll have to respond to that when it happens, which is precisely what happened with the Melford inquiry in the summer.
Thank you. Councillor Busby?
There's just one other thing. You mentioned in paragraph 42 that the emerging plan is in its very early stages. Please tell me that 5 years, it's not taken us 5 years to get to very early stages, and that this thing is almost complete.
Lay his fears?
Well, I can give a comment from a development management perspective, which is that at this particular stage, bearing in mind the relevant steps that a plan has to go through before it's adopted, this is still at the early stages, Regulation 18, preferred options, as it were, and a kind of a consultation based on the direction of travel that the council would like to go in. I'm sure there are a great number of comments that have been received through that consultation process. It's still obviously not yet been through examination. It hasn't gone out through its legal compliance draft. There's still a fair way to go. And I think whilst some of the evidence supporting that plan is clearly going to be very important depending upon the circumstances, I think the weight to be afforded to it as a whole is probably quite limited. But effectively, I mean, it's not going to play a determinative role in this particular application, especially when our current development plan is so forcefully telling us that this is a refusal.
I just think we need to be careful, because I think there should be a reasonable amount. We have spent a lot of time getting to this stage, and I know the official stages have still got to be complete, but I'd be very surprised if...
sorry, point of order against you from Councillor Parker. Yes.
How dare he?
Planning application or the latest stage of the joint local plan?
Well, I think in fairness to Councillor Busby, it is in the papers in front of us, so I think I'm going to allow him to make those comments. Councillor Busby.
I think it's very dangerous to state that. It could, in other applications, come back and bite us, because I think most of us will look at this and say, well, if it's in this draft local plan, then that is likely to end up in the full local plan. I can't see applications and allocations of sites changing much in the local plan.
I think there needs to be, to be honest, I think there needs to be a degree of caution there. I mean, it's clearly an important document, and it's an expression of preference on behalf of the council. Certainly the direction of travel is important to note, but I'm afraid the plan remains untested, and the MPPF is very clear that you need to be careful with the amount of weight that you apportion to such documents as they emerge.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our legal planning expert to just comment and give us the legal jargon.
Just to say that's exactly right. Mr. Stroud is exactly right, and we must follow the NPPF's advice here. It would be dangerous to do otherwise.
Thank you. Right, moving on then. Is there any other comments? No? Right, we've had a recommendation to follow the officer's... we've had a proposal to move the officer's recommendation for refusal, proposed by Councillor Osborne, seconded by Councillor Plum. All those in favour, please show to refuse. It's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, we'll move on to page 41. And the case officer is Jack Wilkinson, but unfortunately he's broken his leg playing football. I think he'd also injured his shoulder before then, so he's doing quite well. But I think his football days may be coming to an abrupt end. We've got Libby, who's going to take us through this. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for reserve matters for the details, appearance, scale, layout and landscape for the erection of 25 dwellings. It should be noticed that the principle of development and access has already been agreed under the outline application, and therefore we're only looking at appearance, scale, layout and landscape. Okay, so I think unfortunately some of the pages haven't come out on the, so hopefully the photos are in there. Okay, so just to let you know that there is some late papers, so you'll see that in page 15 of the application. There are further comments from Lavenham Parish Council. Following those comments, we have received a response from the applicant, who has explained a little bit more for their reasoning for putting the affordable housing in one single group. And they've stated that it does provide a more attractive proposition for acquisition by a registered provider, as it means that the access road and car parking spaces can be that would serve the affordable properties can be transferred in one entirety to the RP concerned, and I'll show you that on the layout plan. And also that from a construction delivery perspective, it means that the affordable housings can be built and transferred in accordance with the 106 agreement, which requires the 8 affordable dwellings to be provided after the 8 market dwellings. So again, I can show you how that might work on the layout. Also, we are proposing an additional condition, which is to provide details of materials, and that will ensure that the materials for the affordable and the market dwellings are the same, and therefore that the development will be tenure blind. So to go back to this one, this just shows the site. It is, you can see the Howlett's garage to the north, and the 2 roads are Melford Road, which leads to Acton, and just along here, and Sudbury Road here, which goes leads to Great Woldingfield and Sudbury, and the remainder of the village is up here to the north. Again, that just provides a bit more context. You can see the sort of outer outskirts of the village and some other suburban sort of cul-de-sac layouts. Again, this provides the constraints. There's only one constraint on the site, which is this TPO hedge here, which is being retained. You can also see the boundary of the built-up area about here, but the principle of development on this site has already been agreed. Aerial photograph, you can just about make out that there is a line of trees along this side here, and you might just about see the hedge here, that's the TPO hedge. So this is the site layout. You can see it's a sort of a cul-de-sac arrangement. So there's a cul-de-sac here and a cul-de-sac here, and then one over here. You'll also note that they're retaining the existing tree belt here and providing a landscape buffer and open space adjacent to it. This is the access which has previously been approved, and you'll also note that there is proposed landscaping here. This is the TPO hedge, so that would be improved, and a landscape buffer here between the site and the garage. There have been concerns about the location of these in relation to the garage, and you'll note from your report that the Environmental Protection Officer's comments. However, when they did noise monitoring, the main issue was from these two roads rather than from the garage, and they are providing a buffer. So it is considered that this arrangement would be acceptable in relation to neighbour amenity of the new occupiers in relation to the garage. You'll also notice the concerns from the Parish Council regarding the affordable housing being clustered in one location. So the affordable housing are these plots here, 2 here, 3 there, these 2, and this one here. You'll note that the comment that the applicant mentioned in terms of ownership, this is the access drive and this is sort of the shared parking court. So this could all be transferred to the RP, which does make it easier in management terms, as they wouldn't then have to pay a service charge to the management company for upkeep of this. And we have had problems in the past about affordability once you add a service charge to affordable dwellings. As well as that, you can see how potentially they could build a first stage, then the affordable housings in relation to the 106 agreement, and then the 3rd stage. So it does make phasing of the development easier. It's also, you should note that this is private housing here, so it's not physically separated from the market housing. It's just in a one cluster. The general advice we receive from strategic housing is that it should be no more than a cluster of 15 affordable dwellings. In this case, it's 8. So these show the street scenes. This is AA, so this is what you would see from Sudbury Road, Melford Road here. So you can see the access, you can see where the landscaping area would be, or the open space area with the sort of mature trees retained. This is within the site, so this is BB here. You can see it's a range of dwellings, sort of similar to what else we have in for modern developments in the area. It is outside of the conservation area and the historic core of Lavenham, so it is considered that a more modern type development is acceptable. And finally, this is the this street scene here. So these are the houses, and this is Sudbury Road, and you can see the TPO hedge retained and enhanced along here. Okay, so these are some of the house types. The thing to point out here is the materials and how the affordable and market dwellings, it would be tenure blind, so they would have similar materials. So these are that's affordable homes, and then these are some of the market homes. So you can see that the same brick type and roof material, and we would want to condition that to ensure that they were the same. Again, there's some different examples. There's some vendor properties. This shows similar windows, so plot 7 would have similar window types to the affordable dwellings. And you'll note here that these plots would have similar door types. So there are aspects of the affordable dwellings repeated in the market dwellings. This is the bungalow, so there's going to be a single bungalow on the site. And then this is the landscape master plan. So you can see on here the additional hedging and the trees being protected with the landscape plan. Again, that's a similar plan with the soft landscaping. And this is the external works plan. So again, you can see the new roads and you can see the area that would be potentially passed over to the RP in that sort of lighter grey. Okay, get the trees. So these are just some photos of the site. As you can see, it's just pretty much bare earth at the moment with some scrubland. You can see the tree belt. This is the tree belt to the south. And again, this shows you where the new access would be. So there would be retention of this hedgerow. It would be cut further down, but retention or landscaping on this boundary as well. So the recommendation is as set out in your report, page 50 and 51, with the additional comment, the additional comment of details of materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no parish council, objector or supporter, but we have the applicant or agent, Mr. Chris Smith. You, sir, have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. Perhaps should remain seated or standing at the end, and I'll see if there's any questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, my name's Chris Smith. I'm Development Planner for Hopkins Homes and Hopkins and Moore. As you've heard, following the grant of the previous outline planning permission for residential development on this site, we've developed and refined the detailed proposals now before you in consultation with your officers to produce a development which we feel will be very much in keeping with the character and appearance of development within Lavenham. As you'll note from the committee report, all the technical consultees are comfortable with the proposals that are put forward. As I said, we feel, in accordance with the officers, that it will produce an attractive new development in a sustainable location. As you've heard, delivering 8 much-needed new affordable homes, together with the requested financial contributions previously indicated within the 106 and via your SIL mechanism. In summary, therefore, we hope that you can confer with your officer's recommendation that the proposals do represent sustainable, attractive development and that you'll be able to support the proposals. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Members, have you any questions? Councillor Parker, followed by Councillor Plum.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm just conscious of the comments of Lavenham Parish Council with regards to the affordable housing, which undoubtedly you've read. Have you had any conversations with Lavenham Parish Council about that?
I must admit I haven't seen any very recent comments. We did meet with members of the Parish Council before we submitted the application. We only had verbal responses and indicated that they were generally comfortable with what we were proposing. The scheme has evolved through detailed discussions with officers since that time, but I think the overall principle of where the affordable housing is proposed on the site hasn't changed greatly. We did send copies of the plans to the Parish Council before we submitted it following the meeting. We didn't have any direct response from them, and the only responses I've seen are the previous ones they made to the application. I think, speaking to officers, we feel that we've addressed the comments in terms of the detailed design. As you've heard, the detailed design materials, finishes will be the same as the open market housing as they are on all of our developments. And as you've heard, in terms of the location of the affordable housing, for both the benefit of the
Thank you. I think
housing
the answer is
association.
that no, you haven't. Have you seen the comments of Lavenham Parish Council, which are part of the tabled papers this morning?
I haven't seen any very recent ones, no.
Right, I think perhaps we could give him that copy, please. And we'll come back to that, okay, after you've had a chance to have a read of it. I think members will just give him a chance to read it. It's a very short statement.
I don't think he raised any issues. I don't think he raised any issues.
No. Did you want to say that? Did you want to comment on that? Okay, you've read that. Does that help you with an answer?
Yeah, obviously we've mentioned about the affordable housing. Yes, the parish have referred to this pepper potting approach. I think, as you've heard, on larger schemes, yes, certainly affordable housing would be spread in different clusters across the site. Here you've heard we've only got a site of 25 dwellings. There's only 8 affordable dwellings. Obviously 8 is below the figure quoted for a sort of maximum cluster size by your officer. So I think we feel that given the circumstances here, as you've heard, the requirement to deliver these affordable houses in one tranche at a certain point in time within the development, for obvious practical and commercial reasons, it makes sense to have them where they are. And as you've heard, in terms of future service delivery, they'll be easy to manage in one location for the housing association concerned. So I think that probably answers that point. In terms of the adjacent garage, we've had discussions with officers on that. As you've heard, in terms of noise, there was a noise report done with the outline application that indicated that the noise came from the roads rather than the garage itself. And obviously we've tried to provide a degree of separation and orientate the dwellings to try and maximise the distance from that boundary as far as possible.
Thank you. I think you've answered all the questions. I'll see if there's any others for you. Councillor Plum.
Thank you, Chair. You're being asked by the Parish Council to consider a pepper pot approach, mainly because this, for Lavenham, is a relatively large development. Would you be in any way come to meet them and halfway, or are you saying that the reasons for putting their affordable housing in one position outweighs every other benefit?
Thank you.
I think what we're saying is that given the size of the site in practical terms, there are benefits for all parties in having the affordable housing where it's proposed to be located in one group. Whilst it clearly could be separated into 2 groups, it would make life harder for this housing association in that there'd be 2 separate areas for them to look after. There'd be 2 separate areas for us to transfer and try and build at the same time, because obviously we'd have to build in between wherever they were. And obviously it would change the layout. It's a small site, it's constrained by TPO trees on one side, some mature oaks on another, a garage that's still operational on the other side, which we need to keep some distance from, and obviously we want to produce something that's attractive, deliverable, complies with all the technical requirements for highways, etc. So, as I say, there have been various iterations of this layout, and we've got to where we've got to. So, whilst there clearly could be scope to relocate some of the affordable houses into another part of the site, it would have knock-on effects, both in management terms and commercial terms, and it's something we would prefer to keep the layout as it is. And in terms of the benefits of separating it out, in all honesty, I can't see what they would realistically be, other than, for argument's sake, some of the affordable housing is split in one part of the site and some in another. As I say, it's going to be 10-year blind, it's all going to look the same, so I'm not sure from the public perception what the benefits would be.
Perhaps you can try and keep your answers a little bit more tighter. I know you're being put on the spot because you hadn't seen those comments. I'm just going to bring the Chief Officer in and I'll come back to you, Councillor Plum.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of policy justification for changing the scheme as is, obviously officers feel it's acceptable already. Strategic Housing has said 15 would be a problem if they're all together. Lavenham does have, as members probably know, H3 is an affordable housing policy, and all that says was affordable housing must be designed to be integral to the development as a whole. I don't know if we can quickly look at the drawing, which just shows where it is in the layout, but whilst it's in the same corner of the site, it's in 3 different bits, if you like, and it's going to be 10-year blind as well. So one could argue that it's integral to the site. Basically, it's not aloof from, it's not different to, it's not all put in exactly the same position. I'd say there isn't a strong policy reason to go away from the layout that we've been given. Sorry, I've got there now. I've finished speaking. So. Can you just open up?
Was, I think, Stuart better.
This shows it.
Yeah, are we able to click on just on that slide, just to blow it out a bit? Click on that then.
I made a note of slide 19 because I was going to ask the question as to where they were, and you can actually point to them.
So you can see on here, we can change the, put it on slide 19, but it's these, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they are in Manchester here, but they're surrounded by the market dwellings, which are located here.
So not really a strong policy justification to change what we've been given.
I think some members were sent plans through the post from the applicant, so they've got them in front of them and you can see where they are much clearer. Yeah. Okay, and Councillor Plum.
Thank you. So the answer to our question is no. And if we were minded to refuse on that basis, what would your plans be?
Well, clearly, as we said, we'd prefer to keep it as is. Obviously, yes, there is scope. If you were not happy with this, then we'd have to relook at things. And obviously, we have options of hopefully negotiating with that officers, or worst case, we'd have to put in another application. But clearly, as we've said, we feel that, you know, as the officers pointed, there's effectively a corner where there are four. There's a terrace of 3, a pair of semis, or 2 pairs of semis, and a detached property in one corner of the site. Now, we could move those around, but as I say, I think the disbenefits of doing that would outweigh the benefits. So my desire, as the case officer has indicated, would be for the proposals to be approved in their current form.
Thank you. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is regarding the development along the Sudbury Road. That it has been noted, and I'm hope I can ask this question. It's been noted from Environmental Health about the noise to those properties, and I'm just asking what you have thought about that in regards to keeping to any suggestions that you should make conditions of, there should be conditions about the noise impact on those properties, please.
I know you've responded to that because we have it in the paperwork, but if you can help Councillor Maybe out on that point.
From memory, and obviously I haven't got it in front of me, I don't believe the noise report indicated that any specific measures were required above maybe looking at the thickness of glazing in certain windows if they're within a certain distance of the road. I think the noise report mainly indicated that whilst there was a possibility or an assumption that noise was emanating from the garage that could be a problem, and actually the higher noise levels were from traffic at peak hours along the roads. And I think that the likelihood is the noisiest times along that road will be in morning and evening peaks, rather than, you know, at night time when the background noise levels are lower, when people would be sleeping, which would be more of a problem.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the Chief Officer just to help out on that, because we found the page 45.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you may have seen members at the bottom of page 45, Environmental Health. They've used the word dominated by noise traffic. I don't know if they meant in terms of any noise going on, that was the dominant noise, whether it is in itself a dominant noise, it's unclear. But certainly they've come up with solutions in terms of the close bordered fence with its BS values. And at the top of page 46, it goes on recommending what the measures are that are required, basically. So they have not come up with an objection, but a set of measures to mitigate any road noise.
Thank you. Councillor Maybe, have you got another question?
If I may, Chairman, and if this is not for this time, then perhaps you will advise me. My concern is these affordable houses, hopefully.
No, it has to be a question to.
It is.
Right.
The point is that over 300 people from the village are engaged in the local businesses, many of which are working during the evening in hospitality. My concern is I do not have, other members may have, a plan that actually shows whether these houses bordering onto Sudbury Road will have bedrooms with windows to the Sudbury Road.
I think, in fairness to Councillor Mowbray, the plan was sent to the existing planning members only. Obviously, you've subbed for Councillor Ayres. One would have thought that she would have forwarded that plan and any other information she had on to you. Anyway, we have seen sight of the plan, but can you pick up her points, which I've forgotten now?
I think, yes, at first floor, some of the bedrooms will face towards that way in those properties that front that way. But to say, I think the level of noise that's going to emanate is going to be from vehicular traffic, and the majority of those movements, I accept there'll be some in the evening, but the majority will be during morning and peak hours when the background noise levels around will be higher. So I don't think if the indication is that there's a need to rearrange the houses just for noise that might emanate in evenings to those bedrooms, I don't think that should be a major issue here. And so I think if there was a noise issue, it could be controlled by an improved specification to the glazing within those rooms.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree. If you're putting houses back onto main roads, you're going to get noise or overlooking them, that sort of thing. It's a fact of life, isn't it? But they have taken necessary steps, as the Chief Planning Officer has pointed out to us. Any other questions? Councillor Barrett?
Thank you. Just a question for you about the bin storage, because although most of the properties probably have access to the rear garden so they can store their bins, in Babergh, most houses, or many houses, have at least 2 bins, the recycling and the refuse, and some have a garden refuse bin, so it's quite a storage problem. Some of these units are middle terrace. What is their solution for bin storage?
Sorry, on the external works plan that the officers have got, there is an indication of where the bin storage and presentation areas are. And as you correctly said, if it's a mid-terrace, then they will have a rear gate that enables them to get the bin out of the gate around the back and to the front of the property. So yes, it's obviously a common thing we have to deal with to comply with building regulations and the requirements of the waste collection service. Then we have to provide bin collection and presentation points and storage points, and clearly, yes, we have to make sure that there's an external route for those. Clearly, we don't want people dragging bins through, have to drag bins through their houses in a modern house to get it to the collection point.
Thank you. I've just got a question I'd like to ask, and it's to do with the affordable houses. And in my area, Great Cornard, and Councillor Plum's area, Glemsford, as well as others, we have these estates, usually a larger amount of houses than the 25 you're proposing, and they put in affordable houses, and they tend to congregate them like you've done in one area, corner or what have you. And you did say in your statement at the beginning that it's easier for management, and that's usually the argument that I hear. When there's a lot of affordable houses, it tends to make a ghetto there. And I'm pleased to note that in your plans that you've submitted, that the materials are as good a quality as the ones for sale, so that they're not as easily identifiable as being out of place or affordable or anything else. Because people do need, in my opinion, to be able to live in those houses and not have that so obvious. Putting them all together, I feel, does tend to perhaps make the area more obvious, and splitting them up a bit more might be an answer to not having them all together. What's your comments on that?
I think, as I said, on a larger site, I would agree. And if we were proposing 200 houses, then yes, there'd be 3, if not 4 clusters of these in in those smaller groupings. But on those, the smaller grouping would still be probably of the same or slightly larger size that we've got in this location. And as you said, they're tenure blind. The materials will be the same. As the officer has said, effectively they're on, if you like, 4 different plots within that area. And as they all look the same, I think once they're developed and lived in, I don't think, in all honesty, that you will notice that there's any difference in those. You know, obviously the people that are living there, once they all get living there, they will not be aware of whether they're affordable or not. And I think a case in point where, you know, some of my family live in affordable housing, there's groups larger than that on a larger estate, and in the 3 years that they've been there, I've not seen that there's been an issue from anybody about those, and everybody seems to get on okay. So I think, yes, in this particular case, that group, and I think, ought to be acceptable, and I think there's enough space in between the dwellings and the materials that are utilised that it will all look as one development as the neighbourhood plan policy requires.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Osborne, followed by Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just 2 questions really. First of all is, with the affordable housing, have you a housing association in line, or has anybody come forward with that?
We haven't got a housing association, if you like, signed up yet. Unfortunately, with housing associations, until such time as we have a piece of paper that says planning permission, we aren't in a position to do that. But what we do, we have consultants that are retained by us that will go around to the various registered providers and see if they're interested in bidding. So we're aware that there are housing associations that will be willing to take these properties. Yeah.
And just one further question, Mr. Chairman, if I'm. Will you talk about the management company for the areas of green space? Has that been identified? Or can you just clarify the position with the management company? Because obviously Babergh don't take on the management of open space areas anymore.
No, on smaller sites such as this, there will be a residence management company that is set up by us to start with. We retain, if you like, a directorship on that for the first 5 years, so that we're on board to help. We have a managing agent who then takes it on our behalf. Each of the residents or each of the property purchasers on completion of their purchase agree to pay an annual sum into a pot effectively towards that maintenance company to look after the landscaping. In addition, on here, which hasn't been raised yet, is because we are having to use permeable paved roads, which Suffolk County Council Highways won't adopt, then the management company will also be looking after that road as well. So there's a clear reason, and it's something we've done on a number of these smaller sites where, for drainage purposes, we have to use permeable paving and permeable surfaces to accord with the requirements of the lead local flood authority in maintaining disposal of surface water on the site, and at the same time looking after the open space, as you said, where public bodies unfortunately don't have the resources to do that anymore. And a residence management company we've found in the last, certainly in my 12 years of dealing with it, has been an effective way, and it works. All the residents pay their annual fee towards it, and they can then see the results, and there's a clear management structure to make sure things get done when they should do.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments. First of all, thank you for sending this. It's very useful. It would have been even more useful if you'd have completed the key. So there are things on here that aren't on it. Also, it looks as though the green landscaping covers half of the Sudbury Road on here, so I don't understand that. It makes it look a broader band of landscaping than it can possibly be. Secondly, it would have been better to have seen more bungalows on there rather than just the one. I think we do know there's a need. If you looked at the housing need, I don't know whether you'd completed a housing need, but if you look at the housing needs, it is for 2-bedroom bungalows, things like that, for older people to downsize into.
Can you get to your question, please?
Yes,
I
certainly will, Chair. Not a wheelchair, sorry, wheelchair. The border at the back with the garage, will you be putting up fences along the back back gardens there? Is that what that dotted line is, and what kind of height will they be?
Yes, I think it's been alluded to. In terms of the boundary with the garage, there will be fencing and hedging put there, as shown on the drawings. At the moment, it's just an open chain link fence, and clearly, you know, we need to have a visual separation, and both for sound purposes, we've heard, and for visual amenity purposes. So there will be a hard fence go along that boundary, as well as additional landscaping. In terms of the bungalow comment, yes, wherever we go, people would say we like bungalows. As you'll appreciate, bungalows are land hungry. We're on a small site, which in commercial terms is quite tight in terms of viability terms. We've managed to get one bungalow on there. It would be difficult for us to achieve any more in commercial viability terms. That's why there's only one on there. Again, if it was a larger site, we were talking about 200 dwellings, then yes, we might be able to have 10, 15, 20 bungalows. But on this kind of size site, that one is really the most that we can viably put on there.
Thank you. One is better than none, but I do take your point.
Is it a trade-off? We demand 35% affordable housing, which you provided. If we said lowered that to 25%, would you therefore have more money in the scheme to put in bungalows?
Well, the simple answer is yes. We would have more money because, as you're probably aware, in terms of affordable housing, the money that we get from a housing association just about pays for the build cost. So there's no, if you like, commercial profit in those. So yes, if that was less, then theoretically we would have, if you like, a greater degree of flexibility in providing, more coverage with bungalows and less with two-storey dwellings. But obviously we're dealing here with a site that's got an outline planning permission with an agreed Section 106 agreement that stipulates how many affordable houses there should be and the requirement for those in terms of their mix. Therefore, that bit is set, and all we're looking at is arranging a reasonable mix of properties on the remainder of the site. And yes, we've had negotiations with your officers, and as I said, we know that there's always a desire to provide more bungalows. We didn't have any to start with, and we've managed to change things around a little bit to get one on. But yes, that is, again, we're happy to say we are at the margins of viability to do that even in this
Thank you.
case.
I'm going to get the officer to clarify a couple of points that you've said in your support.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points
members.
that arose about noise issues. Just to clarify again, the Sudbury Road side, it was recommended to be 1.8 metre close bordered fence, and also double glazing to the bedrooms that are facing that side. In terms of Howlett's Garage, similar. Glazing to rear bedroom of plots 1 to 3 and 13 to 16. So those are all detailed recommendations by Environmental Control, which will go into proposed condition 2 at the end of your report.
Thank you. Do you want to come back now?
Just taking plot 17 in particular, which you probably can't see, but it's the one right in the top right-hand corner, the north-east. Its garden is there's going to be almost no sun in that back garden at all. It's very narrow, it's very close to the 1071. Just wonder whether that block of 3, if you could move that further west and put the car parking spaces the other side of that block of 3, you would then take the buildings away from the road and provide a bit of sun in that back garden.
Let's redraw on the plan, Councillor Busby. Yes, and you know what I have to say to you, have to deal with what's in front of you. I do take your point, but yeah. If you wish to answer that, you can, you don't have to.
I think, Chairman, the trouble with a site of this size is there's always things that you look at and you can do. You could change this, you could change that, and so I think we've got to a point where we'd say this is what we'd like members to consider at this point of time.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? No? You've all heard. Thank you very much. Thank you for, it's a long time you were sitting there and have to answer questions, but hopefully it will be helpful to us. No, thank you. Right, we'll go back to this then. County Councillor. The ward members is Councillor Arfi, Councillor Maybury, who is a member of the Planning Committee. Councillor Arfi hasn't made any comments, so members, it's over to you. Councillor Maybury, did you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does give me great cause for concern. I wasn't the ward member when this outline planning permission was achieved. However, I have serious concern, hence I was asking about noise pollution for the Sudbury Road. As I was trying to comment, the village actually employs 300 people from the village within the village amenities, and a lot of it is hospitality, and they work nights. So they will be wishing to sleep during the day. So I am very unhappy at any bedroom windows being open onto the Sudbury Road whatsoever. I also concur with my colleague here, Councillor Busby, about number 17. That will be a very dark corner, which is a bit of a worry. I also have concerns about any pollution, and I know we've had a report from the garage site. They do actually state that they work 7 days a week. There is also light pollution, because if you look at it, it's basically going into a triangle, although it's not quite because the garage is there. And I have serious concerns about how all of this is actually laid out. I'm pleased to hear that there will be fencing which is similar to acoustic to some of the areas. I also definitely agree about bungalows would have been preferential in lots of these areas because of the actual residential makeup of the village. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I shall listen to what my other colleagues have. I'm really unhappy about the housing along the Sudbury Road with bedroom windows opening onto it.
Thank you. Well, I think those points have been highlighted and commented on, but garage pollution and light pollution, I think they're perhaps relevant points, but I think I would say to you is that in wherever you create a new small estate or a large estate, you are going to have garages and you're going to have street lights on, because these are what people want. But I'll ask the officers if you've got any comments on those points, so you can help out the garage pollution and the light pollution.
No, I mean, the principle of development has been accepted on this site, and that took into account at the outline stage the fact that it was next to a potentially noisy neighbour. They did the work that they were required to do in terms of a noise assessment. That showed that the noise was from the roads rather than the garage. And therefore we have accepted 25 dwellings on this site, and that, given the constraints within it, that does mean that there are going to have to be dwellings, you know, backing onto both Sudbury Road and onto the garage, because realistically, in order to retain those trees, you can't have development on the south side, which might be the quieter side.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? Members? Councillor Barrett?
I'd just like to say, really, I think it's acceptable in terms of layout, design and landscape, and suggest that it is the norm to have double glazing throughout the house. Don't think there'll be any new houses built without that, and so that would deal with the road noise that might arise. And actually, the road, I think, is 40 mile an hour at that stage of the Sudbury Road, so cars should not be speeding. 30. Good, even better. So I think, although there is, obviously some noise, I think it wouldn't be detrimental, and I would like to suggest approval.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parker, do you wish to comment at this stage?
Well, only just to say that I concur with Councillor Barrett's comments, Chair. I'm respectful and mindful of the comments of Lavenham Parish Council. But, you know, a lot of it is subjective, isn't it, Chair? And actually, I think it's quite an attractive development, I'll be honest. And I think, given the constraints that the site is faced with, I think that actually the developer's done quite a nice job here. I take on board the comments of the parish council that, you know, maybe it doesn't fit the Lavenham vernacular, but if the representation is anything to go by, as somebody who lives 2 villages away and has lived here all my life, I would suggest that actually it does. With respect to Councillor Maybury, I'm looking at the plan here and looking across the Sudbury Road and looking at Google Maps. And actually, as far as I can tell, there aren't any windows that look directly into anything across Sudbury Road. So, all things concerned, or all things considered, Chair, I think it's a good little development actually, and I would willingly support it, Chair.
Thank you on that. Did you want to comment?
Just before the vote, Chair, just to remind the additional condition 3, if that could be gone through you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll add on the additional condition, but I'll come to that condition 3. You would accept that, Councillor?
It is the materials being tenure blind, basically, so we'd have to agree the materials.
Yeah, I'm getting nods from the... yes, I'd just like to say at this stage, Lavenham is a medieval village, and it is attractive, it is nicely set out, and I think in fairness to Lavenham and the parish council, they have taken on board quite a lot of housing for us, and also quite a few affordable houses. And I would have been more concerned, I think, if this wasn't an attractive site. And I think, in fairness to the applicant, they have tried and they've listened to our concerns, because this planning committee over the last year or 2 has come down quite heavy on the fact that we'd like more bungalows, we'd like larger rooms in the dwellings that they build, not silly little box rooms, and that we would want the affordable to look attractive and not look cheap and nasty. And I think, in fairness, they don't. I think the next stage that they need to perhaps take on board is not having them all pushed together. But I think I have to accept that it is a small site of only 25, and perhaps in that one corner. But I don't think they should be there necessarily because it's easier to maintain. I think, you know, if they were dotted about a bit, they could still be maintained. But we have got to deal with what's in front of us, members. So I would remind you on that. Now, Councillor Osborne, followed by Councillor Plum.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just actually for our officer present. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just for our officer present, really. Can I just have clarification, please, of the conditions that I noticed perhaps that there are only 2, and the other one is can you just clarify the withdrawal of PD rights, please? What they're involved on this site, please.
Yeah. I had a discussion with the original case officer about this. I mean, you would normally do that at outline, but he said, looking at what is in front of him, it was clear that that was desirable, basically. So just to, so the thing doesn't get overdeveloped with bits and pieces of extensions.
Can you elaborate on them, Libby?
No, just to say that the reason why there are so few conditions is the majority of those have been put on the outline. So there's about 30 conditions on the outline. So it's only additional things. So it would be the noise attenuation, the PD rights, and the details and materials.
So that just applies to conservatories and stuff like that?
Yeah, we would probably look at removing extensions so that they would need permitted development for extensions. We can look at other things. That would probably be the main one, possibly outbuildings, but we would allow things like window lights and so on.
Thank you. Councillor Plum?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but I can't accept the clustering of the affordable housing. From my own bitter experience in my own ward, it doesn't matter how big the site is, how many houses there are, you will ghettoise that particular area. And as the Parish Council would like to see it, that approach, and even if this is in contradiction or not in contravention of Lavenham Neighbourhood Plan, in fact, it is in terms of what they would like. So I can't support this application.
I'll see if I can get you an answer to that.
H3, which you looked at earlier, which I quoted basically, which refers to, as the council was suggesting.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? Right, members, then, if there's no other comments, it's been proposed by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Parker that we accept the officer's recommendation that's laid out in front of you, plus the extra condition level 3, wasn't it, that we saw somewhere? Yeah. All those in favour, please show. Seven. Those against? 2. That is carried. Thank you. That is approved, members. It's 4 minutes past 11 and I can see Councillor Busby would like a comfort break, so we will have a comfort break until 11:15. Welcome back, members. We'll continue. We're now on page 55, and it is the the Firs, Waldenfield Road, Sudbury. Case officer is Rose Walton. We also have, and who may be speaking, or you may want to question, Heather Tucker, Corporation Manager of Housing Solutions. And if you just wave, they know yes, the lady in the stripy dress. Thank you. Right, Rose, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use to homeless persons accommodation comprising of 8 bedsits and has been called to committee as Babergh District Council are the applicant. The site is located within the built-up area boundary of North Sudbury, along the northern side of Waldenfield Road. These are the main Babergh local plan and core strategy policies that relate to the application. The Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Homes and Housing Strategy states that homelessness should be prevented, ensuring that everyone has a suitable home where residents are able to live as healthily, safely and independently as possible within sustainable communities. The Babergh Core Strategy also observes that different groups of people and individual communities have particular demands and often urgent needs for different accommodation. A key thrust of the core strategy, reflecting the overarching social dimension of the MPPF, is to provide homes for all. The provision of 8 bedsits for homeless persons in an established residential area with local amenities and services accessible by foot and public transport represents a significant benefit consistent with local and national housing policies. This is the site. As you can see, it is a detached property with existing access and parking and a rear garden, situated within a built-up, largely residential area. There are no constraints to the site, with no listed buildings in the near vicinity, and it's not in a conservation area or special landscape area. 13 neighbouring properties were consulted, and they are highlighted on this drawing, and we received no objections. We received no objections from any consultees. The Suffolk County Council Highways have recommended a condition for the provision of cycle storage to promote sustainable travel alternatives. This is an aerial view of the site. As you can see, the surrounding area is largely residential, with a few shops and takeaway restaurants, as well as good access to public transport. Here is another reminder of the site plan. Here are the ground floor plans as they are existing and proposed, with 5 bedsits and a shared kitchen, laundry room, toilet and bathroom as highlighted. Here are the first 4 floor plans as they are existing and proposed, having 3 bedsits and a shared bathroom as highlighted there. These are the front elevation plans as they are existing and proposed. 1 door would be replaced with a window, and 1 ground floor window would be enlarged. There would be no extensions, and all external finishes would remain as existing. These are the rear elevation plans as they are existing and proposed. All ground floor doors and windows would be replaced with 3 windows. The side elevations would remain as existing. The character of the surrounding development is a mix of 2-storey and single-storey properties, set back from the road, with a mix of finishes of red brick and render. This is the site. These are bungalows. These are a row of flat roof garages. These are 2-storey dwellings, as are these, and there are also more flat roof garages to the rear and a parking area. In terms of residential amenity, there would be limited potential for overlooking, as the first floor windows are to remain as existing. There is also limited potential for light blocking, as no extensions to the property are proposed and the boundary treatments would remain as existing. The enclosed area marked here is the rear garden of the property, which has no inter-visibility. The east-facing flank wall of the neighbouring two-storey dwelling, which is highlighted in blue, has no first-floor windows that overlook this area. This is the view of the property from the garages to the rear. This is the property, and this is that east-facing elevation of the neighbouring two-storey dwelling. As you can see, there are no first-floor overlooking windows. The access is already existing, and 2 off-road spaces are provided. The Suffolk County Council Highways Authority have raised no objections to this. The site is sustainable in transport terms, having good access to public transport and services and amenities within walking distance. Although the site offers 2 off-road parking spaces, Waldingfield Road and the surrounding roads don't have parking restrictions and are wide enough to accommodate on-street parking if required. Currently, Waldingfield Road is used for on-street parking for some local residents and visitors. However, many dwellings along this road have off-road parking provision. In addition to this, given the nature of the persons who will occupy the bedsits, further on-site parking is not required. The condition recommended by Suffolk County Council Highways will assist in the promotion of sustainable travel alternatives. The recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose, for that very high-tech presentation. That was excellent. I could follow all those colours quite easily. But very good it was. Quite impressed. Right. Just one point I want to clarify. Could the Chief Planning Officer tell us, you show 8 properties, I think it was, where you'd consulted the neighbours. What do you actually send out to these neighbours? What do they get? Just that we're proposed to alter a dwelling, or what? Can you just explain that?
The letter they will have received, in common with the site notice just outside the property, will have a description as you see in front of you. So it will tell them there is a planning application for change of use, as you can see there, blah, blah, homeless persons unit with 8 bed sets. So they'll get that letter telling them that's what the proposal is.
Thank you very much. That's quite clear. Right. We have no public speakers for Town Council, objector, supporter, applicant or agent, which is us, I suppose, County Councillor. But Councillor Alison Owen is a member of the Planning Committee, and as such you've decided to stay and remain as part of the Planning Committee so that you can take part in it as often as you wish. Right, then I'll come straight to you to open the debate. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Yep.
Councillor Osborne.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Might I just add something too? We have two officers from homeless and housing.
I did point that out at the beginning.
Could we have their comments on exactly the position of those particular before we actually go to debate? So
right.
More the members.
You're happy with that, Councillor Owen, because I had called you. He wants the 2 officers to comment before we go into debate. You're happy? You're okay. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Owen. Right, I'll come to you, officers, and between you, perhaps you'll take us through what you want to tell us. What do you need?
Good morning, councillors. The reason we've chosen to propose the conversion of the fairs is because we desperately require more temporary accommodation within our districts. At the moment, we unfortunately often have to place homeless individuals into bed and breakfast accommodation in Ipswich, which is naturally outside of our district. We want to try and place people within our ward boundaries. We want to keep them close to their employment, family and support networks, and for those with children, close to their schooling. Naturally, if we place them out of the district, this can create quite a lot of complexities for them with sustaining those links. As of today, we actually have 12 individuals accommodated in bed and breakfast outside of the district. By providing an extra 8 units within the district, that would significantly reduce that. It would also help us work towards the ambition set out in the homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy, which was approved by members earlier in the year, which aims to eradicate the use of bed and breakfast longer term. We're very much focused on trying to keep people within our district and having more suitable accommodation. Although this is still shared accommodation, it's accommodation that we will manage, and it will be more suitable than placing in bed and breakfast, where at the moment we're not the only people to place in bed and breakfast. Other local authorities place in there as well. So although the individual bed and breakfast providers do risk assess and assess, who would be most appropriate to place, we will know exactly who we're placing. It will only be people that we place in there. So we feel that by providing more accommodation within our districts that is in our management, this would be far better for our residents. Okay.
So would this be solely for homeless people, or if you had empty rooms or spaces and you had an other category of people not got a roof over their head, would you accommodate them there for a short time?
The accommodation would only be for those that we would owe a duty to under homelessness. If we ever got to a position where we didn't need all of those rooms, then we'd do a review of our stock and look at actually whether we've got too many temporary accommodation units. Unfortunately, the way things are at the moment, I can only see us increasing temporary accommodation further. I can't see us reducing that at the moment. We do work, because of the way we work with Mid Suffolk, we do place within each other's districts if we need to. So at the moment, we have got a couple of Babergh applicants actually placed into Mid Suffolk's temporary accommodation rather than leaving theirs empty. So we do try and use the fact that we are working together as both councils and make best use of the stock across both rather than placing into bed and breakfast.
Thank you.
May Chairman, it's just to confirm, it's not intended anybody would have a long-term secure housing act tenancy of, because it would be a bit difficult because they're sharing facilities, and in any case they would be exempt because they're temporary under, forget which part of Schedule 1 it is, but the Housing Act, they're being provided for temporarily, so by definition not secure tenants. Is that right?
Thank you.
Yeah, the accommodation we provide is either under Section 188 or Section 193, so it's a temporary accommodation duty. These are actually licensable rooms, so all of our temporary accommodation is licensed, which is sort of the least security of tenure somebody can have, but with a view that they move on to more secure tenure. It's a transitional accommodation. It's somewhere somebody can stay until we're able to find a more permanent solution, whether that be in either the private rented or social rented sector.
Thank you. Members, because we've got the Housing Solution Manager and team here, I think, if it's okay with you, if you wish to ask questions during the debate directed to them, then we'll field that question. Okay, so we'll take the debate as normal, and if there's a question for them rather than the planning officers here, we'll expect you to come in with and help out. Thank you. Right, members, Councillor Owen, you're next.
Hello, really. It's really nice to see that homelessness and everything is going to be accommodated in Sudbury. Just want to ask, how long is temporary? When you say it's going to be a temporary accommodation, how long will that be?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Owen. There's no set specific time because it depends on what duty somebody's under and what options we have. I mean, on average at the moment, the stay varies between often sort of 3 and 9 months. It sometimes can be longer, but that does generally tend to be for the larger families where we have less stock, and these would generally be for single people. So on average, probably around 6 months, but it could easily be less or sometimes slightly more depending on what their needs are. But, but it wouldn't ordinarily be more than sort of 9 months or so. Yeah.
Any other? No, sorry. Any other comments, members? Councillor Busby?
Yeah, a couple of points to pick up. You mentioned schooling. Would be putting children into these rooms?
We have on occasions, we do have to use shared accommodation. We try and move them into self-contained, but if the option was we had maybe for a family, there was 2 rooms available in, for example, the Firs, or it was a case of placing them in bed and breakfast out of the district, I would much rather we place them in our own stock where they're close to schooling with a view to moving them to more suitable self-contained accommodation when one becomes available. We review our temporary accommodation every day, literally every day, sometimes more than once a day, because things do change so frequently, and it's about having that balance. And we try and keep people as close to the networks and schooling and employment over and above, if it means place them out of the district.
Are you saying that we have quite a few homeless people with young children?
Yeah, the majority of our homeless applicants are families with children, so we place them into accommodation. We have far fewer single homeless people, but we do get single homeless people as well. We also get single or couples that might be pregnant, so may not have had the children yet, that may need accommodation. But we do have a large number of families that we're supporting with providing longer term housing.
If I might, sorry, Councillor.
And you mentioned manage, how you manage. Does that understand the physical administration of the rooms, but what other services do you provide?
So we have 2 full-time staff that are based out in the districts managing our temporary accommodation units. In Babergh we have 36 units at the moment, and this obviously, if we have approval for this, will take us up to 44. They also manage the units in mid-Suffolk districts as well, but they're out on the districts all day, every day, going out, talking to the residents. We do regular room inspections, normally fortnightly. We deal with any issues, any matters that arise where residents might be in dispute about noise or such like. So we do have staffing on site. We also have support workers that are not solely focused on temporary accommodation, but we have 3 based within the Housing Solutions team, and they will offer support to those that are actually in temporary accommodation and require support to help them with maintaining their tenancy and reduce the risk of homelessness reoccurring, because unfortunately, even though we provide accommodation, doesn't necessarily mean someone can sustain it without some support to try and prevent them from returning to actually being street homeless.
So you don't actually, they're responsible for cleaning, normal day-to-day stuff?
They're responsible for keeping their own room tidy and clean, and we expect people to tidy up after themselves if they use communal kitchens and bathrooms. We do have contract cleaners come in and clean communal areas once or twice a week, depending on the size of the scheme. But we do try and encourage residents to take ownership and responsibility, because obviously when they move on from there, they're not going to have people coming in doing their cleaning for them. And so if the properties aren't being well maintained, they do get warning letters advising them. We expect them to clean up after themselves when they've been in the kitchens, bathrooms and these sort of communal spaces.
Thank you. So what you're saying then really, we're going back to what we used to have in Sudbury at the top near the fire station there, which was the old nurses' home, which is now being converted into units. That was Babergh's homeless unit, which I remember many years ago I was part of helping get that all set up. So it's a complete circle, we're going back. Sorry, it's clear, because when this first read it sounded like it wasn't families you were including, but now you're saying that, it's so, yes, I've got Councillor Mabry next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't mean to cut you short there.
Generally speaking, this will be for single individuals, but what I wouldn't want is, if we've got an empty room which is suitable for a family, I wouldn't want us to exclude them from being placed within our districts and placing them out to districts. In regards to the property you're talking about, I presume you mean Stour House, which was converted a number of years ago into 11 self-contained flats. That is where we try and prioritise families, so they have self-contained accommodation. These are big flats at Warner Place, which is what it's now known as, and Orwell Housing have subsequently built Hambling House next door, which provides another 4 units of self-contained accommodation, and we will try and prioritise families for self-contained accommodation wherever we can. But all I'm saying is, if we've got vacancies within somewhere like this or other shared accommodation, I would much rather we place them within our districts than move them into bed and breakfast outside of the district. It's about making best use of the stock.
That is absolutely music to my ears, because I always felt we should never have closed that down and altered it. We should have stuck with it and carried on. But anyway, we're back there now. So, members, Councillor Maybury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really approve of housing for homeless. It's the worst thing ever, must be, for someone to be homeless. I am concerned about shared facilities in these days, particularly when you're talking about families possibly being there with children, and I have experience of this too. It would be, I'm just trying to get my head around this. If you have identified that the majority of the need is for families, why this building or proposal has not been split in another way, i.e. perhaps the top floor is a separate unit for a family and downstairs is other. Because if you're trying to put a family in one room, and I know you haven't said that yet, surely there isn't the room for parents and 2 children in one room, and even if they're side by side with shared facilities, I'm sure that parents would be quite concerned about what is going on.
Councillor Maybury, you're quite right, and I share a lot of what you're saying. I'm sure members do. I have to remind you we have to deal with what's in front of us. I'm not sure that's strictly the planning side of it, but I will get the answers on it because I think it is important. Members, I know we all can stray on this subject if we can try and keep it to the planning side. But perhaps you can help us out, because Councillor Maybury got very valid points about sharing facilities. I don't like it. We all have en suites nowadays.
So historically, we would have very few single people. We do have more now than we have historically. That's largely due to a change in case law that came about, where there was a case that went to the High Court where they looked at vulnerability for single people, and as a result we do own more single people a duty now than we did previously. However, the lion's share of our work still is homeless families where we have to provide accommodation, and what I want to make sure is that where we have the self-contained accommodation, we're able to prioritise the families for that. The single individuals will then share accommodation in somewhere like the Firs. At the moment, when we place in bed and breakfast out of the districts, they do share facilities. So, you know, we are placing people out of the districts in shared facilities at the moment. I feel it would be better to place people within our districts. Separately to this planning matter, there is a strategic review of temporary accommodation being done over the next few months, and there will be a paper going to cabinets next year to look at potentially providing more temporary accommodation longer term, but that isn't necessarily an issue for today, but I just feel that does hopefully answer your question around what temporary accommodation do we need and what's more suitable. There is a longer term plan for looking at what accommodation we need, but we feel this is a good option for predominantly single people.
Thank you. The Chief Planning Officer just wants to comment.
I just want to remind members, I'm not sure if this was in the report, obviously Rose had to inherit it quite late, so thank you for presenting, but it should be made clear that were this for 6 people, it wouldn't need planning permission. It would be a C4 use class, which you're allowed to change to from a C3 dwelling house. So actually the extent of what needs permission is just 2 rooms, 2 people. So that's the sort of space for manoeuvre we've got here in our consideration, I would suggest.
That's the fallback position, isn't it?
Fallback would be 6 people. So it's a little bit beyond what doesn't need planning permission. That's all I want to say, Chair, just to remind members.
Chairman. Also, I was going to speak earlier. I'm glad I didn't, because I think Heather's answers confirm what I suspected. I used to specialise in housing law, but it was a long time ago, and I'm out of date. So I do recall, it's still the case, isn't it? People come to us and we have to assess what used to be called priority need or vulnerability. And that meant, and that used to be, when I did it all those years ago, that meant either a responsibility for young children or age or physical or mental health. Now, I mean, I think you know the case law best than me. It's now slightly more generous. That's right, obviously, yeah. So, but, I mean, and we have a duty to advise and assist. Is that section 96 still? Which would, so if somebody who was able-bodied and young, they'd get some help in finding accommodation that it might be available, yeah.
did you want to highlight?
Yeah, so following the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act, we have more advice and assistance duties now than we had historically, where it used to be a discretionary power. It's now a statutory duty. The priority need legislation is still there, and we've still got the code of guidance that backs that up. It's just where we've had case law, which has made it, means that we now have a duty to more individuals than we did previously. But yes, it's basically those that are deemed a duty under priority need legislation or case law.
Thank you. Councillor Busby?
Could you go to slide 10, please? Just so we have a look at the layout of the ground floor. While you're digging that out, actually, I'd like to propose that we have a post-site visit. Once it's been converted, I'd actually like to see the unit, to see what it's like. Even if it's occupied, in fact, preferably if it's occupied, just to find out a bit more about how people use it and how comfortable they are with this.
I see no reason why we can't ask the Cabinet members that are responsible to arrange a meeting for us.
I'll come in. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm more than happy to do that. To be honest, what we will do and what we did when we opened another property in Mid-Suffolk previously was we actually held an open morning, so also for the local residents, because sometimes people can sort of that connotation, they think homelessness, they think there's going to be problems with actually realising potentially, anyone could potentially become homeless at any time, really. So we'll hold an open morning where we will invite people to come along and have a look in the local neighbourhood. We'll write to them all. Yourselves will be more than welcome to come. We'll also be inviting the ward member, cabinet members, cabinet lead for housing leaders to come out and have a look, and also officers to come out and see what we've done and to see. So when they're talking to individuals, they can talk to them about what the temporary accommodation consists of.
Thank you.
Thanks. I wasn't proposing a party, sorry, which it sounds like you're suggesting. Okay, so can you just talk me through? I can't quite read some of those things. You've got the... What's the bottom left? Is that, say, laundry?
Okay, so at the bottom left in the yellow, so as you go through the door to the left-hand side is a laundry. So there'll be washing machines and tumble dryers for them to do their laundry.
Right.
Then I think it's a store in front of that. I can't read it on here. I've got the plans on here, haven't you? No, I don't think so. I think the next one is a store. Then to the right, it's a large kitchen, and there'll be sufficient cookers and sinks in there for the number of people staying. So we have regulations we have to follow under the Housing Act about the number of kitchen facilities per person. So there will be 2 ovens, 2 sinks. There'll be sufficient washing machines and tumble dryers as well. I think there'll have to be 2 of each within the laundry. Then round past the stairs to the right-hand side will be a communal bathroom, which will have a bath and a separate shower. And then there's obviously the 5 bedrooms. And then upstairs...
Yeah, I understood the upstairs.
Okay.
So there's no actual lounge, communal lounge?
No, there's no communal lounge. They will just have their own rooms. We've previously had schemes where we have shared facilities and we have communal lounges, and we either find they're not used or they're not used appropriately, and actually residents prefer to spend time in their own space. So we've actually chosen not to have any communal lounge. They will just have their own rooms and share the kitchen, bathroom and laundry spaces.
Somebody would like to see upstairs, so if you could go to the next slide. The other question I had was, well, 2 questions. The rear garden looked like quite a big garden. Who looks after that, and what facilities are in that?
The garden's mainly laid to lawn with shrubs around the outside, and that's maintained by our in-house public realm team. They maintain it at the moment, and they will maintain it if the conversion is approved.
And they have access?
They have access to it, yeah. It would be shared, and it will be maintained by the public realm team. Whilst I'm on the microphone, on the top floor, so you've got the extra 3 bedrooms, and then the other bathroom we're retaining, so that will provide another bath, toilet and separate shower. So there are 2 bathrooms, 1 large kitchen, but in effect it's almost like 2 kitchens, and then the large laundry space as well.
And then my final point was really about the parking. I know Highways said they're happy with it, but you've got, if their family's going to be in there, there's only 2 parking spaces. We talked about them being able to park outside on the road. I don't know that area. Is that
The large frontage, I believe, isn't it?
Generally speaking, like I say, it will be single people placed there, and it won't be an everyday occurrence that we're placing families there. It will generally be singles. At the moment, the number of single people we place that actually have their own transport is minimal, and we have other sites where we have very minimal parking. It's like some sites where we have zero parking, and we don't have parking issues there, so we're not foreseeing this being an issue. But obviously, it's something we'll monitor and we'll address if there's a problem.
The garages that were to the left of it, do we own those? Are they used?
Yeah.
They are used. Okay.
Trying to find a picture of the front, because I think it does show, you know, although there's spaces there, I reckon you could squeeze 2 or 3 cars in there quite easily. Any other questions, members? Councillor Maybury, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know the answer, so please, if you could tell me, what is the requisite number of lavatories needed for 8 bed sits, please?
It's 1 per 5 individuals. That's why we've got 2. So there's 1 on the ground floor, 1 on the first floor in the designs. That's why we've got 2, because that would meet the Housing Act regulations. So all of these plans have been approved by the private sector housing team. They're the ones that go out and licence houses of multiple occupation. So because we're a local authority and it's our property, we don't actually licence our own, but we make sure our properties are to the same standards those as if it was a private person coming to us wanting to licence the property. So it will meet all the regulations as set out within the homes for multiple occupation legislation.
So we're as open and transparent as we would expect
absolutely.
a private applicant.
When the Homes for Multiple Occupation legislation came in around licensing last October, we asked for private sector housing to come in and inspect all of our temporary accommodation, where it's shared accommodation. So even though we don't have to license it ourselves, we wanted to make sure that we're doing the same standards that we'd expect other people within our districts to do.
Thank you. Councillor Maybury.
Yeah, if I may, I just find that surprisingly few for the amount, particularly if you're going to have children perhaps sharing a room with parents. I just find that quite a low amount, but that's my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Barrett?
One comment then, a question I should say. What are the regulations about fire then? That sort of springs to mind with multiple occupancy in terms of alarms and fire doors and.
Yes, so the property has been assessed by surveyors, and our compliance individuals have been out and officers have been out and had a look. They've designed what fire protection systems we need. So in the business case, when we've looked at doing the conversion, we've got it all proposed about exactly which regulations we need to meet, what type of fire alarm system it is, what type of fire doors we need, the number of fire exits, all of that is built in. So all of that will be set up. It will be have an alarm system built in, and normally the fire service will come out and have a look in those sorts of circumstances before we open it up and see if they're happy and make any recommendations.
Can I just ask, are residents allowed to smoke in the public areas, or is it classed as a...
No. Smoking is only permitted outside of the dwelling. They can't smoke indoors. And that's the same with all of our temporary accommodation that's shared.
How long is this going to take to completion to open?
The proposal initially was April, but because of the time it's taken to go through applying for the planning consent, we're now expecting it hopefully to be June.
Any other questions, members? No? Councillor Barrett?
Perhaps I can propose that we accept then, if everyone has asked questions and satisfied themselves.
I'll see if I can get a seconder for you. Councillor Osborne, I think you've actually said, unless there's anything new anybody wants to bring up? No? Well, it's been proposed and seconded that we follow the officer's recommendation as laid out on the papers before you. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. That is carried. And I think, members, we've got to the end of our meeting. Just to point out that there isn't a site inspection. The date of our next meeting is the 4th of December, and the one after that is the 18th of December, I believe. And I'm led to believe that both of them at this moment will be on. And one could have more applications than the other one. So bear in mind. But if that alters, I will get the officers to let you know by email as soon as possible, so that you'll have more time to go out and do your Christmas shopping. I'll think about that one and let you know in due course, Councillor Busby. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, can you just repeat those dates for me? I was daydreaming.
4th of December is the next... 4th? I thought I got it on. Wednesday, 4th of December, 9:30, and Wednesday, the 18th of December, 9:30. Although there's a possibility that that timing could be altered. Now, I think Mid Suffolk's also got a meeting, so we may have to work in with them. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you to our planning officer. You were